Special report on the Gulf War. Reporting from ABC News World Headquarters in New York, Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The President is going to speak to the nation now. We've known for a couple of hours that the President wanted to come out and talk to the nation about the state of the war in the Persian Gulf. We're also pretty much assured that his news is going to be good. That is to say that the war is very close to a formal end. General Schwarzkopf, the Allied commander, spoke at an extensive briefing in Saudi Arabia earlier today, and he said the mission has been accomplished. So perhaps that's a hint of what the President is going to say. Let's go quickly to the Pentagon and briefly to the Pentagon. ABC's Bob Zelnick. What's the status on the battlefield?
Peter, the bombing stopped hours ago. The fighting is winding down. They're just sporadic little episodes. In the last major battle of the war, along Highway 8 in southern Iraq, 200 Iraqi tanks were destroyed. That's more than 90% of the tanks they brought to the Kuwait theater are now gone. Okay, Sam Donaldson is standing by in Kuwait City. Sam, a couple seconds from you before the President comes.
Well, Peter, the city's asleep at the moment, but asleep from joy of the exhilaration of welcoming people in. It's free now. It's not asleep because of the fear of the Iraqi occupation, which has ended.
Okay, Sam, we'll come back to you after the President's speech. Thanks very much. At the White House, our White House correspondent, Britt Hume. Britt, what's he going to say, do you think?
Well, I think he's going to say that the war is basically over, and he's going to begin to sketch out some of the steps that he'd like to take with the coalition to try to begin to organize the peace.
Okay, Britt Hume and my other colleagues will talk to them all when the President has finished. General Schwarzkopf said it today, the mission is accomplished. One historian said today, never has so much damage been done by one army to another, with one army, the U.S. Army, suffering so few casualties. Here's the President speaking to the nation from the Oval Office.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. Kuwait is once more in the hands of Kuwaitis in control of their own destiny. We share in their joy, a joy tempered only by our compassion for their ordeal. Tonight, the Kuwaiti flag once again flies above the capital of a free and sovereign nation, and the American flag flies above our embassy. 7 months ago, America and the world drew a line in the sand. We declared that the aggression against Kuwait would not stand, and tonight, America and the world have kept their word. This is not a time of euphoria, certainly not a time to gloat, but it is a time of pride. Pride in our troops, pride in the friends who stood with us in the crisis, pride in our nation, and the people whose strength and resolve made victory quick, decisive, and just. And soon, we will open wide our arms to welcome back home to America our magnificent fighting forces. No one country can claim this victory as its own. It was not only a victory for Kuwait, but a victory for all the coalition partners. This is a victory for the United Nations, for all mankind, for the rule of law, and for what is right. After consulting with Secretary of Defense Cheney, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Powell, and our coalition partners, I am pleased to announce that at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, exactly 100 hours since ground operations commenced and 6 weeks since the start of Operation Desert Storm, all United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations. It is up to Iraq whether this suspension on the part of the coalition becomes a permanent ceasefire. Coalition political and military terms for a formal ceasefire include the following requirements. Iraq must release immediately all coalition prisoners of war, third country nationals, and the remains of all who have fallen. Iraq must release all Kuwaiti detainees. Iraq also must inform Kuwaiti authorities of the location and nature of all land and sea mines. Iraq must comply fully with all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. This includes a rescinding of Iraq's August decision to annex Kuwait and acceptance in principle of Iraq's responsibility to pay compensation for the loss, damage, and injury its aggression has caused. The coalition calls upon the Iraqi government to designate military commanders to meet within 48 hours with their coalition counterparts at a place in the theater of operations to be specified to arrange for military aspects of the ceasefire. Further, I have asked Secretary of State Baker to request that the United Nations Security Council meet to formulate the necessary arrangements for this war to be ended. This suspension of offensive combat operations is contingent upon Iraq's not firing upon any coalition forces and not launching Scud missiles against any other country. If Iraq violates these terms, coalition forces will be free to resume military operations. At every opportunity, I have said to the people of Iraq that our quarrel was not with them, but instead with their leadership, and above all with Saddam Hussein. This remains the case. You, the people of Iraq, are not our enemy. We do not seek your destruction. We have treated your POWs with kindness. Coalition forces fought this war only as a last resort and look forward to the day when Iraq is led by people prepared to live in peace with their neighbors. We must now begin to look beyond victory in war. We must meet the challenge of securing the peace. In the future, as before, we will consult with our coalition partners. We've already done a good deal of thinking and planning for the post-war period, and Secretary Baker has already begun to consult with our coalition partners on the region's challenges. There can be and will be no solely American answer to all these challenges, but we can assist and support the countries of the region and be a catalyst for peace. In this spirit, as Secretary Baker will go to the region next week to begin a new round of consultations. This war is now behind us. Ahead of us is the difficult task of securing a potentially historic peace. Tonight, though, let us be proud of what we have accomplished. Let us give thanks to those who risked their lives. Let us never forget those who gave their lives. May God bless our valiant military forces and their families, and let us all remember them in our prayers. Good night, and may God bless the United States of America.
42 days and 3 hours since the air campaign began. The war is now behind us, says the President. And just to get the absolute precise details of the battlefield on the table once again, he says that all U.S. and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations provided Iraq does not fire on coalition forces or does not launch any Scuds. He may particularly have in mind there the kind of deadly business the Iraqis have continued to do against the Israelis even after the ground war began, and that devastating attack on Saudi Arabia the other day when 28 Americans died in one attack, more than died in all of the ground war itself. Just to remind you what General Schwarzkopf said at his briefing earlier today in terms of the overall casualties for Americans in the campaign, 79 dead, 213 wounded, and 44 missing, and 9 prisoners of war. And the President calls again for the Iraqis to release immediately all Allied coalition prisoners of war. The Iraqis have never let the International Committee of the Red Cross even come to see them. These conditions about asking where the mines are, insisting that Iraqi liaison officers meet, are all pretty much consistent with the President's demands last Sunday, in which he at one point said the Iraqis had just that one day to get out. So much has transpired since then.